And we'll move on now to Matt, who has experience in the commercial area in capture, transport, and storage.
After you introduced me the way you introduced me earlier, I was very glad, number one, that everybody's sticking to 2 or 3 syllable words for me. It's helping. And the other part that it reminded me of is I went to KU and got an environmental engineering master's degree, and I paid for it at night. So I worked nights at Lawrence High School full time, and I was taking a class called Industrial Wastewater Fluid Dynamics and Corrosion Control from Dr. Burkhead. And at night, I would go to the school, go into the tunnels, and strip out all the water pipes. So it had all corroded out. So I was cutting it out, cutting new pipe, threading it in, running it in. And after about a semester, at the end of the semester, I went up to Dr. Burkhead and said, I just want you to know how cool it is that I'm taking this class that's talking about the anodic and cathodic principles of dissimilar metals and how you're going to have this increased failure rate. And at night, I'm seeing it in reality. And he said, really? I've been teaching it 35 years and I never knew if it was true. And I just went, oh my gosh, okay. So kind of along the lines of what we've been talking about and how exciting this is as a disruptive technology right now, something Bob had told me actually 4 years ago, and I agree. Secretary Kenderdine was talking about gas and tight gas and shale. And I've met someone who wrote a dissertation on a plane who told me he wrote a paper that said it was absolutely impossible to get gas out of shale. And of course, he was wrong. So a lot of people have been successful. Along the same lines on carbon capture and pipelines, it shocks people to know that it's being done, and it's been done for many years already. We have CO2 pipelines, especially in New Mexico. CO2 pipelines with pure CO2 coming from the north to the south. We have the CO2 and water I told you about yesterday. H2S coming out of the ground in all the wells, and gas processing, as Secretary Kenderdine talked about earlier today, that's their job. It's what they do. They strip out all these impurities for a fee. So the Exxons, the Chevrons, and all the other guys will drill the well, produce the well, and then they'll send their gas to us to get the water out, CO2, H2S, other impurities, the condensates, the NGLs. And we charge a fee for the service. It's a specialized service, and strip that out. And we send the gas down to the Kinder Morgans and the places that send it up here, send it to California or to the Gulf Coast for power plants, for home heating and that type of thing. And again, that's been going on for years. One of the coolest things from a historical standpoint that I finally figured out, I'm working with a gentleman named Paul Ragsdale. He was the Yates operation manager for many years. And around 2004, 2003, the Dagger Draw gas plant in Artesia was hit with compliance, what do you call that? Consent decree from the NMED. Excess emissions from processing gas with too much H2S in it. And he did a bunch of asking around, and it gets to the point Matthew brought up yesterday. If you lays the target and say, this is the target, there are so many people in the field and in academia, like we're talking about here, which I love, that understand what to do to resolve it. You just need to have groups like this get together. So he ended up finding someone from Encana, and in Calgary area, they had resolved this problem with H2S and had created this acid gas injection well I was telling you about. So this SWD that was serving the gas plant was converted with support from OCD, UIC division, and the commissioner at the time, who was a guy named Dr. Balch, to support the change from an SWD to an AGI. All that H2S went out of the air. All of it went into the subsurface with the CO2, and the plant was back into compliance. NMED's happy and all of that. So just going along, and what we have right now, again, starting with Dagger Draw gas plant in 2005, there's around 24, 26 AGI wells right now in New Mexico. And as discussed, you guys are dead on. And again, I pointed this out yesterday. A lot of states don't have what New Mexico has. They don't have the place to inject and sequester. They wish they did. They don't have the natural gas. They wish they did. So New Mexico is just sitting on this rich environment for what we're talking about right here. 24 wells, and also this is in the Permian and Midland area. Like I said yesterday, we're drilling a well right now. We're seeing the fluid dynamics on that well. We're through the Delaware Mountain Group this morning. It's really exciting to know that there's so many people that are very good at this and know how to drill the wells carefully, safely, and put the CO2 away forever. I pointed out earlier yesterday, and I think it's very important, we're injecting H2S as the 10% component of this 90% CO2, 10% H2S. 100 parts per million of H2S will kill you instantly. We're injecting 300,000 parts per million of H2S into the ground to keep it out of the atmosphere. And if there was an issue with the caprock not holding or any of these things since 2005, we would know it from the H2S standpoint for sure. That's so much more dangerous than what we're breathing out right now. So that said, what's been really neat to see is how the class 2 wells and evolving into the class 6 wells and the awareness that all the states are getting right now is the elevated expectations for class 6. So again, we have pipelines. We're moving it every day. There's a 7 o'clock call every morning where we have 35 compressor stations moving this stuff around the Permian. And I actually have to correct something that I may have misstated yesterday to Bob. The 99.98% is methane capture. So we're capturing 2 billion cubic foot of gas a day that leaves, and we're losing 0.02% of that when people talk about methane loss. So it's just kind of outstanding how that the guys do keep this going, but we can always improve. So beyond that, what we're talking about now and all of the wells and what we've been doing with support from the PRRC and the CUSP is upgrading the way we've done class 2 wells. First off being the 3D seismic. First time I met Bob, he said, you really ought to get it. And I said, it's expensive. We don't need it. And I was proven wrong. I had to like eat crow, and we did 3D seismic from there. All of our wells have a DTS cable, so distributed temperature sensing cable on the tubing. And that has already proven to be invaluable because that fiber optic can sense a leak right at that location in the tubing. This well we're drilling now is 19,000 foot. It's kind of hard to find a leak when you're just doing an MIT, checking for a pressure differential on the annulus. But that fiber optic tells you it's right here. Here's where you need to work on it. And it gives you a preliminary warning instead of something that's at failure mode with an MIT. The other thing we're doing with fiber optics is DAS. So distributed acoustic sensing cables on the outside of the casing allows us to do a baseline of what the formation looks like before we inject and be able to identify where the plume is going to be. And again, that comes from class 6. So these are some things we'll talk about later on monitoring, but the technology that's out there is just been great. And one of the changes that we've actually implemented that is just something that was a brain snap, really. All of our pipeline, we have an entire department that does corrosion control. They place the corrosion coupons in line. They have the anodic, cathodic principles. They minimize corrosion and everything buried in the ground, check for any line breaks, any shorts, anything that could be a problem. So we know that pipeline's got integrity. Class 2, we never did that. In fact, no one does that. But now we're all talking about, all right, we're going to do this. We're going to put a corrosion coupon in line before injection. So we're going to be able to pull those coupons, measure the expected loss of the wall while we're injecting. And it's such a simple thing, but it's just, again, something we hadn't thought of, and a lot of people haven't. So in these discussions we're having, it's going to be great to see industry step change by taking the data that's being presented here, because I cannot say enough good things about the CUSP, PRRC, and the education that we've all given ourselves and the cross education. But we will see these changes. And frankly, we have to prove that. If we want to do carbon capture, we have to prove to the public that these are the things we do to be protective, because it can be dangerous if you're not doing it right. You can damage the water table forever. You can cause seismicity. So the technology has been introduced here. We are doing it now, and it's been really exciting to do it. And with that, I'll yield the floor.